Hello and welcome to HUDL Up, the podcast from HUDL, where we're holding space for real stories, shared power and collective change. HUDL works alongside young people, organisations and communities to create fairer systems and better opportunities, not just for young people, but with them. And this podcast is where those stories come to life. Each episode, we'll hear from young leaders, practitioners and partners who are reshaping how decisions are made and programmes are designed. Together, we'll explore what it takes to build equitable partnerships, share power meaningfully, and create change that lasts. We believe that when young people are involved in every stage, from design and decision-making to delivery, systems become fairer and communities become stronger. So let's huddle up and get started with today's episode, which is joined by the lovely Floree Zamanegra, who helped to kick off episode 1 of Huddle Up. So, Floree, we started Huddle Up by sharing our own journeys and our personal connections to Huddle. Since then, we've heard from different people across the Huddle community, from young people, from associates, partners, and various teams across the UK, all of them sharing their own connection to this work. So it kind of felt natural to use this episode as an opportunity to do a full circle. So, Floree, we're going to kick off with, when we talk about the Huddle way of working, what do we actually mean?
There's many things to explore, I guess, when we talk about Huddle and who we are and how we work. Really, we are about equity. We believe that everyone is equal regardless of where they come from and where they work and their backgrounds. Our ways of working is also about building community and supporting young people and organizations to really bring their authentic selves in the mix. We also love bringing joy and care and love. We're all about collaboration. We're all about letting go of our egos and really trying to be of service and work for the common good to see how can we solve some of the complex issues that the world is facing at the moment, whilst also feeling cared for and feeling listened to and feeling good on the journey, because we're trying to go away from those capitalist systems where we constantly have to run and put masks on and achieve a lot and burn ourselves out and have to gear into this professional version. So really for us, I think Huddle is about creating better experiences for everyone, but also we're really big on paying young people for just being young people, as we feel historically young people have been underappreciated financially, or they've been expected to work for free just because they might not have enough work experience. But actually at Huddle, we believe that their lived experience and the journey of being young people is really, really, really important. And really, ultimately, Huddle is a community of freelancers who share different experiences and backgrounds, but who come together to support organizations and young people to achieve their vision and their strategies.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I can't put it any better than that. So I think what I want to do then is kind of just move us on to the next question, which is why do you feel then that co-production has become central to how we design and we deliver and we learn in the way that we do?
Really, if we go back to the basic of co-production, it means making something together. And as Huddle is a bridge between organizations and young people, co-production felt like the right methodology because we believe in equity, but we also believe that those being affected by the issue we're trying to solve should be at the forefront of solving those issues. And we believe those people should have the opportunity to do this and also to be paid for it. So really, we are doing a lot of co-production in our work because we believe that if we connect lived experience with expertise, with professional experience, is pretty much the strongest tool that we can enable to create change and to find new ways of seeing and new ways of doing.
You know, that's really interesting. So I think something that I wanted to pick up on was around lived experience. And now that we're currently in very much recruitment window, and we're looking for young people who have lived experience, I do sometimes wonder whether we are asking young people to bring that lived experience based on what they're already experiencing now. So, i.e., coming from a place of where that wound is still very fresh, or are we asking young people to kind of bring lived experience from a place where they have gone through it? And I guess you could almost term it as coming from a place of the scar. So not operating from the wound, but operating from the scar. I'm not sure if that makes any sense, but like, what's your thoughts on that, Floree?
I know this is a subject we're constantly exploring together. What does it even mean
Yeah.
to lived experience, and what the organizations mean? And we have to tread it very carefully because we work with young people from a lot of different backgrounds that hold a lot of experiences, but we also need to be careful to not box these young people and start defining them or labeling them through their experiences.
Mm,
So we might recruit young people who have gone through a journey that we want more insight into, but we also need to be careful that we don't define that person only through their lived experience, and we realize that intersectionality is key and that we are not one thing, we are many different things coming together. Recently, we've been running a recruitment looking for young consultants who have had challenging experiences in further education.
mm,
So obviously we've been looking at loads of different challenges and loads of different demographics, and we're bringing young people together, but really we're interested in what helped them on the journey and what is their insights and what do they want their peers to not go through because they might have had a difficult time, without labeling each and every person, but actually tapping into the hive mind of our community to really identify the essence and what are we learning from the collective experience so that we can make specific recommendations to organizations.
yeah. No, I hear that. And the thing is, I think also there have been times for us at Huddle where we haven't necessarily felt that a young person is ready yet to be able to step into this space and to do so safely, and for us to be able to do it in a way that is trauma informed. So like, do you mind sharing with the listeners how we've, I guess, maybe engaged those voices that are maybe less ready to step into certain advisory consultancy positions?
In cases where we feel young people are not ready to join our programs, we still try to create mechanisms to truly listen to them. And this might come in different shapes and forms. Sometimes there might be some one off events, or we might be doing surveys where they can provide their own thinking from their own space. But we also worked in ways in which some of our young consultants would listen and facilitate conversations with young people with lived experience. So we recently closed a fund that was focused on the criminal justice system, and we ensured that young people with those experiences are at the forefront of decision making. So our young people have been having conversations with them. We've been doing a lot of listening exercises. We've been also creating opportunities for them to refine the criteria and even look at the funding applications that we received and share their insights. So although from a governance point of view, they weren't able to join a full-fledged panel, they were still able to really shape the work.
Yeah. And I think when we're saying like they weren't able, I think it's more like, I think my view on it is that they're not ready yet, but being able to kind of engage in the way that they did may mean that they are ready later on to kind of participate in governance at some point, if that, and maybe this is an opportunity that kind of sparks that interest or that engagement or that level of engagement for them. I don't know. I'm just thinking that. So, I mean, we're using the word co-production quite a bit, right? So when we say co-production at Huddle, what do we actually mean? And I think for me, when we say co-production, it means making something together. And I think that in its simplest terms, it's when two or more people or groups work jointly to create or deliver something instead of it being like one-sided and everything being done alone or everything being done in silos. And I think over the years, I'm definitely of the mindset that when it comes to co-production, the less spaces you have where it feels segregated, i.e., you have the experts kind of having conversation and then you have the young people having conversation, and then later down the line, everyone comes together. The less you have of that and the more you have of everyone kind of shaping from the beginning together and bringing their expertise and their ideas and doing that throughout the journey, the better buy-in that you have. And I think the more innovation that you have as well. And that's not to say that it's not about creating spaces for those individual groups or pockets to have their own conversations, because that's absolutely needed. But it really is about the kind of the shaping of that process and then working through that process together. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you covered it nicely. And I was more thinking about what's often misunderstood about co production.
Yeah, what's misunderstood then?
People think it's a super positive, efficient process where everyone's happy and everyone is collaborating and things are happening fast and we can find solutions, and that it's such a quick fix to organizational problems or trying to find a new strategy or developing a fund. So I think there is a misunderstanding that it's simple, that it's a super positive, joyful experience all the time.
Or like a linear experience, right? Like it kind of goes, you have X number of meetings, and by the end of those meetings, this is going to happen.
Exactly. And many organizations put a very specific timeline, sometimes quite tight. So, really, in reality, it does take a lot of community building to be able to run a successful co production process, because it is about building trust between those people participating, making sure that everyone understands the background, why are they there, what is the strategy, what are they trying to achieve, what happens when we disagree, what are the values that we uphold as a group in a co-production process, but also making sure that people are willing to let go of their egos, to really listen to each other and to identify what is this sweet spot that they're all bringing together that is linking with the desired outcome. Because for me, this is it. It's kind of like the art of the hive mind, is how do you find the Northern Star and the commonality from different people with different backgrounds and visions and ideas coming together and saying, actually, this is it. This is the direction we want to go on together.
Mm. I think the reality of it as well is that with all the will in the world, even in the spaces that we're in, co-production is initiated by an organization. It's not usually something that's initiated by young people. So for me, it's kind of like the way that co-production works well is when that organization has set the time to really think about what they want the outcome to be. And I guess what we've been calling the red lines, like what are the things that cannot move and cannot change? And then going into that process with absolute like honesty and transparency and not entering into co-production without those things preset. Like, does that make any sense to you? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is something we had to learn throughout the years and refine and tighten things more, and also be able to tell our clients what are the non-negotiables and where are you not willing to go. Because otherwise you can create a lot of issues if you call in young people or people in generally, hey, we have this program and we want to co-produce it with you and we're going to put this amount of money and you can do whatever you want with it.
Mm,
And then people put their hopes up and they start thinking of their ideas and they might come up with a solution or a direction. And then all of a sudden it's, oh, actually we can't go there. And
Yeah.
this is the sort of thing we try to avoid. So we always, I guess it's linked to the red lines that you were saying. And I always think about the fact that co-production is hard and it has sticky points, and there are moments where you feel lost and there's so much data, because we all try to think macro and create as much change as possible for as many people as possible. But really, I also learned that it's important to pick your battles and pick the parts of your system that you want to influence, rather than try to be everything for everyone.
Mm.
Because even if you bring 10 professionals together and say, hey, there's this amount of money and I want you to decide what you want to put it in, it will be equally hard. So it's not about the fact that we co-produce with young people or we co-produce in intergenerational spaces, although I guess that has its own quirks. But really, this is a difficult task for everyone. Even in a family or a group of 10 friends, if you have to agree on something, it's hard. It will take time. There's a whole negotiation that needs to happen, and different voices, and looking at power. Power is also like, who is actually influencing, who is talking the most, who is not talking, and what is the role of the facilitator to really bring everyone in, and
Mm.
what are the tools and processes and methods that you employ, and how can you bring creative mechanisms as well for these groups to really create their collective vision and to feel part of something together, and to really follow their intuition as well. Because ultimately, I always say co-production is not a science. Co-production is an art, and
Mm.
it's very unique to every group and every organization.
Yeah, no, that is so true. Thank you. So, next question then. What have we learned over the years about the structure, care, and accountability needed to make co-production meaningful? So we've already spoken about what is often misunderstood, and we've clarified what it means to us. So what's been the learning? What have we learned so far?
We definitely learned that the why is really important. So, not focusing so much on the activity or the funding, the numbers, the optics, but really, what are we trying to change? Who brought this to the organization, and what was the research, or who's calling in for these solutions, and making sure there's a buy-in from everyone.
Mm.
The other important thing is, as I mentioned before, is paying people for their time, for their expertise from day one.
Mm.
That does
I think
bring
also, just to add to that, then it's also leaving room in the budget for the additional things, the things that are not planned for, because you just never know whether there's an additional meeting that's needed, or there's an additional, like, a resource that's required to enable a young person to really be able to kind of thrive and bring themselves into the process.
Absolutely. And what you said previously as well, to be clear on what decisions young people can actually influence. Young people are cool with the different levels that they're involved, as long as you're clear and you say, actually, what we need you to influence is this part, maybe not the whole process, but we want you to make this decision, and it's okay. What we're trying to avoid is the false promises. And then also, it's about building the right structures and support, not only the space. So we might have co-production sessions and meetings, but at HUDL, we always create space for one-on-one check-ins to see how everyone is finding the process, what they need, how are they finding it. Sometimes people can't engage in a co-production process for personal reasons. So how do we find new mechanisms for them to share their voice when maybe they can't attend all the sessions, or they're having a challenging time? So it is about that support and structure. And also, we really focus on the training aspect.
Mm.
What do young people and what do professionals or staff members of organizations, what training do they need to be able to co-produce? Sometimes we bring sessions around power and influence. We look at systems change, but we also look at facilitation and how different people can hold different spaces. So we also have a wide array of trainings to bring this extra support, so that we don't assume that people are ready to go and their knowledge is leveled up.
I guess the other thing as well is that we're not asking people to be experts in this space, right? Then we're not asking them to be experts in co-production. We're not asking them to be experts in grant making. So the time that we invest in training is so that we can ensure that everybody levels up, right?
Yeah, also, as I mentioned earlier, to be honest about the power and who has the power, who is giving it up, and who ultimately has the decision-making power. And this might be different to different programs, different funds, different organizations, which also taught us to have good decision-making processes in place to manage the differences and make sure we can move forward and that we're not going too much backwards as well, because that can be a tendency of co-production that you kind of get somewhere and then you might feel, oh, maybe we need to go back because we missed something. And I think that comes from perfectionism as well and trying to do everything perfect and in the best way we can.
Yeah. I mean, I want to point out at this point that like we are definitely seeing more power being shifted to young people, right? Which is amazing. And I think it speaks to the shift in organizations in terms of how they want to impact the lives of young people and communities and the decisions that they're taking, which is fantastic. But I guess if we go with the old adage, right, with power comes great responsibility. I probably completely said that wrong, right? But ultimately, there is responsibility that is then held by the organizations, it's held by us, it's also held by young people in order to kind of make the co-production space work. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, and this reminds me something to be mindful or careful with as well is that sometimes we can be to have the best intentions and we might say, ooh, we have £1 million and we're going to bring 10 young people and we want them to do something for their communities. And let's give them all the power. But we've learned throughout the years that that can also really overwhelm young people because all of a sudden you find yourself with so much responsibility, big amounts of money, and that's when you feel the pressure to get it right. And that's when you feel the pressure to represent all the young people in the UK, in the world, depending on who you're targeting. And that's something to be mindful of. And I guess this is what we go back to making sure there is the right support and the right expertise in place, because giving too much can equally be harming for young people.
So with that in mind, how has Huddle's approach to co-production changed over the last few years? What have we learned?
I guess we learned to put the red lines that we mentioned earlier and making sure the ask is very clear for everyone, and also where the power sits and where the decision making sits. We also learned that whatever timeline an organization has or a program has, that we need to double it. Yeah,
Double it.
pretty much double it. We also learned to develop different decision-making streams and models. We've learned to bring creativity in the process and music and poetry and manifestos and conversations and different tools. We also learned that we really need to spend a lot of time on the problem. So we do use human-centered design many times on our co-production journeys, and we really look at what is the problem we're trying to solve and really dive deep and really listen to the communities we're trying to serve. As I always say this quote from Einstein that he said, if I would have 1 hour to solve all world's problems, I will focus 90% of my time to finding the right problem, because once I understand the problem that I'm trying to solve, I can come up with the solution in the rest of the time. I'm not saying this exactly like Albert, but you get the gist. And I think this is something we've been trying to do. But also, whilst doing this, we also realized that we can't put pressure on our young panel members or young consultants to try to represent all the voices, because that also puts a lot of pressure on them. And actually, recently, we've been learning that your lived experience is okay, and being a young person is enough, and just £1 million is not a lot of money. So
Yeah.
actually, let go of expectations and trying to be everything for everyone, and just do what you feel is right and do what calls you. And that's why the artistic and creative process is really, really important in our approach. And I think this is something that we're still developing. And also we've been bringing more collaboration as well and working with other associates so that we can also rethink how we deliver things. And I think this is at the heart of HUDL, is constantly growing, constantly exploring, constantly stretching ourselves, constantly changing our methodologies and bringing new people in to challenge our minds and beliefs, because we also don't want to keep on doing things in the same way we've done them before. And that's why testing and iteration is really big for us. And we've been testing so many different things throughout the years, and some of them worked and some didn't, but it made our practice stronger.
No, absolutely. And I think the final thing I wanted to add on this question about what's changed, the thing that has changed, or I think the thing that has really strengthened because it's been fed back to us and demanded, is mapping the co-production journey in terms of what's happening, what's coming up next, and what decisions have been made, so that that is super clear, because we know that like we're working with a range of different people. Everybody learns differently, responds differently, recalls differently. So having a central place to kind of have that all mapped together has been vital to the process, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. This is very important, with the caveat that we can map a journey and we might have to change it depending on what's happened. And that's why co-production can make a lot of people uncomfortable, because we live in a society where we're used to going from A to B. And in a lot of professional spaces, we're expected to have clear timelines and to say, this is what's going to happen in 2 weeks, and this is what we're going to do in 6 months. And of course, we can map to the best of our knowledge, but we also tell our clients we might have to shift things, because as we go through the process, we might realize, oh, actually we moved quicker through this stage, or, oh, we need more time because we haven't quite grasped the direction, or, oh, we need to add an extra training that we didn't think about, because every experience is unique and we have to adapt. And this is something that can be quite uncomfortable for organizations, especially when there might be certain deadlines given by trustees or coming from external funders. It's about how do we work efficiently and how do we ensure that we meet our deadlines, but also making sure we don't put pressure on our young people or on our clients to do things quick just for the sake of reaching that deadline. And how do you negotiate or find out what's the best course of action?
Yeah, no, I hear that. And I think that, and I feel like that is very much geared to, I guess, the overall co-production plan. I think the point I was trying to sort of highlight was about even just tracking like the decisions that are taken in the co-production journey, and ensuring that everybody's clear about what led to that decision, so that you can move on. Because I think you mentioned before about having to sometimes in the co-production process, feeling the need to go back. And I know that like in some of our more kind of recent co-production spaces, that is and has been like a source of frustration.
Yes, absolutely. And for sure, documenting, recording, sharing notes, having a central space, but not having too many documents,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
really helpful in the process as well, because people then can review. Because this is the other thing which we experience with all our projects, is finding a date and a time for everyone in the co-production process to come together. And
Mhm.
so we will always have staff members or young people who can't make certain sessions, but that's why we always record, we always have notes. We use Slack as a communication tool where we share with those who weren't able to come. this is what happened, or these are the questions we explored. Can you share your answers? And what I've been hearing is that this process worked really well, and people who weren't able to be there every time, they still felt part of the process, and they still felt like their voice was listened to.
Mm. And we don't always get this right, by the way. I'm just wanted to say this to our listeners, right? We don't always get it right. And we're also learning from like partners. We've worked with various learning partners as well. So yeah, I'm just wondering, I guess when we haven't got it right, how do we approach that?
With honesty. At HUDL, we're very honest,
Mm,
maybe too honest sometimes for our own sake. And it's just about naming and saying, this is not working,
mm,
or we need more time, or I'm feeling a lot of frustration. Let's unpick. Or do we need to pivot and,
yeah.
and see who has more capacity to do certain things? Because this is the other thing. In co-production, we want everyone's voice to be included, but it doesn't mean everyone has the exact same role. And you might have people that might take things offline, or they might be doing a bit more research, or they might be coming together to have micro conversations. So for us, it always worked really well to have working groups and to have less people workshopping different options and going deeper and then coming to the wider group as well. So I also wanted to clarify that if we have a group going through a process, it doesn't mean everyone gives the exact amount of time and input, because also different people might bring different expertises. And even in recent co-production processes, we had some people focus more on the operational side, other people looking at impact and learning, other people looking at communications and how are we going to communicate this with the wider world, or the people, the organizations we're looking to attract. And so this is the beauty of playing to your strengths and interests, because also not all the young people are interested in everything, and trying to bring everyone in every aspect of the work, it could definitely slow it down as well. So it's also how do we stagger and operate in a more efficient way, because also we want to avoid having to spend 5 years to keep on going round in circles to find the solution we've been looking for.
And the reality is we don't have 5 years. We usually have anything between, what I would say typically, would you say 8 months to 18 months? Would you say?
Yeah, I think
Process?
8 months to 18. And for sure, if we have a super open call, we're leaning towards the 18 months. But if that's some of the direction is funneled in terms of the direction or the strategy, or if some boundaries are in place, then we can definitely operate within the 8 to 12 months.
Yeah, so true. So moving on. So since we started the podcast, and I guess since we've been working over the 8 years, I feel like we've developed a framework. So our framework currently at HUDL is to start well, hold well, and end well. So can I ask then, like, what does it mean to start well, and what do organizations need to take into consideration at the beginning of the process in terms of involving young people in their work in co-production?
Sure. I think, first of all, before even bringing the young people,
Mm,
there's something around organizations understanding why are
mm,
they doing this, who will be involved with the work at their end, how much resource they want to put in it, what is the purpose and where are they trying to go with this.
mm.
And sometimes that purpose develops as well. So obviously, no pressure in organizations having everything sorted. And I think that's why we come in with our expertise to also advise and see what level organizations are at, because this is for us to also check, have you worked with young people before? How are you feeling about it? Do you need extra support? We sometimes run training sessions on unlearning and learning how to work with young people, which is really not about learning to work with young people. It's about learning to work with people from different backgrounds
Yeah,
and
hold it space.
building a different cultures. And then once we're set up with the organization and once the young people come in, I guess there are two levels. One is taking the young person on an individual onboarding journey and
Mm.
having conversations with them to also understand why are they there, what do they want to bring, what access needs do they have, how do they learn, what training they would like to receive, but also is there any training that they would like to share with the others, what passions they have and what other things they've been working on, because we also don't want to make the assumption that this is one direction. We learn so much from our young people, and we always try to bring our young people as trainers and facilitators, and that's why we work alongside our young people as associates. And then we go on the collective journey, which is really important between the young people, but also with the staff members, exploring ways of working, what everyone needs, wants, desired outcomes, how do we get there? And the young people understanding more about the organization. And really, it's about building that community and understanding and making sure that everyone has the right resources in place, but also that there is that flexibility. And we always start well with a clear strategy for sure. So it's just about setting up the vibes as well, because we keep on saying, let's just have a good time. There's no point in stressing and burning out. Let's get to know each other and create these friendships as well. I feel like it's about also having a good time and getting to know each other as full people and what that means in the process, and making sure we're not producing young people who all talk the same and dress the same and say all the things that we can predict in terms of the solutions. And actually, how do we enable that cultural diversity that will bring the innovation in the space?
Yeah, amazing. I mean, I can't even add to that. I think you've just said that amazingly well. So I'm gonna just move on to the next bit, which is, so we've looked at the start well, and I want us to explore hold well in like later episodes. So I just want to focus in on like, what does it mean to end well, and why do endings matter as much as starting well?
I think me and you have been talking about this for many years, that with many youth projects, young people are brought in, they might be consulted, they might have a conversation, and then the organizations or the groups never get back to the young people.
Mm.
So a lot of our young people complain that they don't know how did the implementation of whatever they consult and how did it go, and what was their impact on the project. How did the collaboration with these young people impact the organizations, how did it impact their thinking. This is something that is really important to us, to really bring what did we learn from this experience, and most important, how it changed the young people we're working with. And a lot of our clients say that this is their biggest surprise, that they don't realize the journeys that they create for the young people, because usually they might think, oh, we want to bring young people to influence our funding. Obviously, we work with a lot of grant-making organizations. We want to serve the communities. We want to change our processes. But then when you start seeing that these young people are becoming leaders in a lot of big organizations, that they're becoming funding managers, that they're starting their own organizations and doing incredible things, that's the sort of things that might get lost on the way, because usually when you bring a learning partner, they are more focused on what are we learning from this fund, what are we learning from this collaboration.
Mm.
But we don't really look at the systemic change that we're creating on every staff member, every young person that is involved with HUDL, other organizations that we're collaborating with as well, So I guess this is what I call the HUDL ripple effect as well. And as you said as well, I'm not saying we have it all right or that we are the ones,
Mm.
but I think we are creating some incredible ripples, and it just brings a lot of joy, and it brings inspiration and motivation to me to still be part of this community and to see that the interventions we are bringing are truly changing lives and are truly changing systems.
There's also this creation of lifelong friendships that I don't think we ever think of as being an outcome, but it's certainly there. But yeah, thanks, Floree. So I'm thinking about the final question before we wrap up today. And I guess my next question is, what do you feel takes longer, costs more, or feels harder, but is still worth doing?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question. And I would say three things. Number one, building relationships. It
Mhm.
takes long, but it's worth it. And you said it beautifully as well. We have built friendships that I know are going to last forever.
Mhm.
And that's beautiful in itself because it does improve your well-being and purpose and connection on this planet. And then I would also say that collective visioning, it does take longer. It might feel hard, but it's really important to come together and reimagine the world we're trying to create. Because if
Mhm.
we don't have a collective vision, how are we even going to co-produce solutions and funds and criteria if you have 10, 15 people who all create their own vision in their heads, but there's no crossover? And then I would also say what feels hard and also takes longer and costs more is truly listening to the communities we're working with and truly listening to our young people and also truly listening to the organization. There's a big listening exercise needed, and that's also the beauty of huddle sitting at the intersection, because really we need to ensure that everyone is listened to, and then we can also push different boundaries within the space as well and identify common understanding. And really, it's important to remember that together our solutions scale exponentially, because we do live in a very individualistic society. We've been shifting in the last 100 years to me, but really we need to go back to we, because that's what's going to change the way we do things, which will then bring the world that we're wishing for.
Yeah, I agree. So, Florrie, the next question I wanted to ask is what becomes possible when young people, practitioners, and facilitators like us learn together? And I don't mind kicking off with the response. And I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is that we get to reimagine the world together. We get to have open conversations. We get to generate ideas that may never have been put on the table. And I think that that is such a vital thing. And then the other thing that I feel I've seen over the years is that we get to create roles for young people that pay them. And it's another avenue for young people who may be studying, who may be working or have care responsibilities. It's a way for them to be able to share their lived experience, but not have to sacrifice on their financial security. So I feel like that is something that is so important. What do you think, Rory?
Yes, absolutely. And I guess it's also what we make possible is to create new ways of doing and new ways of being,
Mm,
and just bringing more empathy and compassion in the space and creating a more joyful experience for everyone. Because I hear so often from our young people coming from their full-time jobs or their universities or their schools and saying, this is such a breath of fresh air, and I'm here with my people and I'm having important conversation. And I think this is it. We're making it possible for young people to speak with other young people that they would have never interacted with otherwise, from different places, spaces, of different ethnicities and ages. And when that happens, and especially when we create intergenerational spaces, anything is possible. And that's why we're also big on the intergenerational piece, because we don't want young people to be siloed. We're living in this world together, so we need to solve our problems together rather than create all these different silos that have been really ruining us as a society.
Yeah, no, amazing. Thank you. Okay, so Floree, we're almost at the end of episode 10, right? I feel so honored and I feel so privileged that we've been able to get these episodes out. So I'm just wondering, like looking ahead, how do we want to use Huddle Up next? How do we want listeners to help us shape and deep dive, right? Because when we first started with the podcast, we were responding to the fact that various groups of young people were saying, we want to share our stories. We want to hear about other people. We want to hear about partners. We want to know what's going on. We want to have the kind of frank conversations that we have in our sessions. We want to share them on this podcast. So we've kind of just shared different stories, right? So I'm just curious as to like how we might want to use Huddle Up next. Like, what's your initial thoughts?
There's a few things that come to me. In the spirit of co-production, I would love to put it out for our listeners to also suggest conversations and people we should interview. But also, we have quite a few young people who would be interested in hosting some of our conversations. And I just wonder, how can we be even more creative or do interviews and bring, what I mean interviews is record people in different spaces and bring their voices in that way, because also being on a podcast can be daunting. I know for the majority of us, in the first 10 episodes, it was the first time we've ever been on a podcast. And I just wonder, what are other mechanisms to bring voices at the forefront of HUDL Up? And I'm just curious, what is useful and what interests people, and why are we doing this? Because it started as a desire to share some of the work, and I think we should definitely continue, because there's still so many of the projects that we haven't even touched upon, and
Yeah.
there's a wealth of knowledge and inspiration within our community of young people. So it's continuing what we do, but then also seeing how we can shift things a little bit so that we also bring some freshness for the next series.
Yeah. I mean, all of the above. I think that I am really curious to know what people would like us to deep dive into. Like you said, who do listeners want to hear from? And as you know, I'm a big champion of debate club, so I would love to have more debate club episodes. But yeah, final thing then is, if listeners were to take one thing away from this episode about our work, what do you want that to be? I mean, I'm happy to start. And I think that if there's something that I would love for listeners to take away, it would be recognizing that co-production is more than just a task, that it's an opportunity for transformation, for connections, and for personal growth.
Amazing. And I would say just give co-production a go.
Mm.
You're going to get it right. You're going to get it wrong. Mistakes happen. There will be moments when you will wonder, why am I doing this? And why did I sign up for this? But then when you make it on the other side, it's so powerful and so cool. We've been hearing it over and over again. So definitely give co-production a go and let us know how that goes for you.
So that brings us to the end of today's episode. So a massive thank you to you, Floree, for all of the work that you're doing within Huddle and across the community. It's been amazing being able to have this conversation with you. And then a massive thank you to those of you joining us for today's Huddle Up episode. As we move into the next series of Huddle Up, we want to share more about what is happening across Huddle and the youth power and leadership space. So that means new guests, programs, teams, more debate club, sharing more around our associate model and the learning behind the scenes. So we want to hear from you. What should we deep dive into next? What are you trying to figure out in your work, and what would be useful for us to unpack? If you'd like to explore our work or get in touch about involving young people in your program, strategy, or organization, you'll find links in the description of this episode. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening now, and join us next time as we continue holding space for real stories, shared power, and collective change. See you next time.